If you've been wondering about buying a home in a neighborhood with a homeowners association, or more commonly called an HOA, I'm going to give you some pros and cons that will let you know, well, what you need to know to help you make an informed decision. Why do HOAs exist? Is it worth the additional expense? What are my dues used for? I'll be breaking down these questions and more to give you lots of food for thought about HOAs, good or bad, when buying a home in the greater Indianapolis area. If this is your first time to this channel and you want to know everything about real estate in Indianapolis and the surrounding areas like Carmel, Fishers, Noblesville, Westfield, Zionsville, Whitestown, then subscribe below and tap the bell for notifications. Hi, my name is Susan Roberts with Homes by Roberts Realty, brokered by EXP. We get calls and emails every day from people just like you looking for help on making a move, and we absolutely love it. Whether you're moving in 9 days or 90 days, give us a call, shoot us a text, or send us that email. All the information you need is in the description below so that we can help you make a smooth move. Maybe you've heard stories from your friends who bought into a neighborhood with an HOA and then were subject to strict rules on the appearance of their house, or maybe you've heard about those pesky HOA fees that seemingly go towards nothing, or you've heard of those HOA board members that have nothing better to do than to hassle you and try to ruin your life. Well, in this video, we're going to be a little bit less dramatic than that. We're going to talk about the pros and the cons of buying in an HOA. Listen, I'm not pro-HOA or anti-HOA. I'm kind of like Switzerland on this matter. I don't have a horse in this race. My job here is to educate and inform you on the home buying decision. I have seen your comments and read multiple feedbacks in varying degrees of strong language about HOAs, and it's time to address the pink elephant in the room. Yeah, well, if the HOA were in charge, they'd probably tell you to paint that elephant blue, or else they'd fine you $50. That's a little HOA humor, and that's about as good as it's going to get. So, first of all, what is an HOA? It is an association for a planned housing community that makes and enforces rules for properties in that subdivision. So when you buy a house, it's either going to be in an HOA or not in an HOA. Even before you view the property or before you submit an offer, you're probably going to know if it's in an HOA or not. So why do people have such strong opinions on it? Let's begin with the goal of the HOA. Regardless of what anyone tells you, their goal is to maintain the property's value. That's the sole purpose and the goal of an HOA. It is their job to maintain and even increase or try to increase the value of the properties within that subdivision. Now, again, why do people have such strong opinions? Sounds like a good goal to me. But let's start out with our first con of buying in an HOA. The first con is that the HOA actually can determine the exterior look of your property. Seriously. So when you buy the house, you're not going to be able to, say, paint the door that bright purple as an example, or significantly renovate the exterior. If the whole neighborhood has vinyl siding, you won't be able to upgrade to cement board siding, even if your brother-in-law works for the cement board siding company. Some people, however, will call baloney, a nice word on that one. I buy the property and own it, so I get to do with the property whatever the heck I want to do. Well, that's somewhat true and all, but if you buy into an HOA, there are rules and regulations called CCRs, which stands for covenants, conditions, and restrictions that all the homeowners must abide by, and some of those rules dictate how the property presents itself. In other words, what you can and cannot do. If you're the type of person that doesn't like rules, doesn't like being told what to do, especially with a property that you own, maybe an HOA is not the best fit for you. And that's completely okay. Just remember that the rules of the HOA are there to maintain the property's value and create a harmonious look. Have you ever driven down a street and there's like cars parked on the lawn, shingles falling off the houses, yards that are overgrown and generally have a messy appearance? That doesn't or shouldn't happen inside of an HOA. So one of the pros of living in an HOA is that the neighborhood is going to have a neat and tidy appearance. You have to keep the exterior of your property in a certain condition to be in compliance with the HOA rules. Now listen up. The HOA is probably not going to come out to your lawn with a tape measure and measure the length of your grass to make sure that you're in compliance. Well, maybe not the HOA, but I can tell you for certain that the city of Indianapolis has a division of, listen close, weed liens. I can hardly say it. Yes, I can vouch for that. As an investor seller of mine let the grass in the privacy fenced backyard grow to over 12 inches. Not only did he get a hefty fine, but a lien had been placed on the home that he had to pay before closing. Who knew? But I digress. Back to the HOA. They will want to make sure that the exterior of your house conforms to the rest of the neighborhood. So any sort of renovation or any sort of major change that you're think about doing to the exterior would probably require an architectural review submitted to the board of the HOA. You might also want to read the bylaws first in the HOA docs before you spend any time on considering significant changes. The next con about living in an HOA are those pesky HOA fees. So you bought the property, you pay the mortgage, and then you've got to pay a couple $100 or more monthly, quarterly, or yearly in addition to your mortgage. HOA fees are not optional. And if you don't pay them, you can get a lien placed on your property. You just can't opt out of being part of an HOA in most neighborhoods. Some are a little funky and have different rules. It doesn't really work that way, and you can't say, well, I don't use the pool or play tennis or have any kids that use the playground, so I don't want to pay all those HOA fees. You have to pay the HOA fees or else seriously bad things will happen. A lawyer could be sending you some registered mail next. But why the fees? What am I helping to pay for? They go towards operating expenses, maintenance for the common areas, and any other sort of amenity. Things like a pool, tennis courts, the clubhouse, snow removal if the city doesn't do it, and some communities even negotiate contracts with garbage removal companies so that all the trash bins are out on one day so that, well, bins don't, sorry about this, trash up the neighborhood. Okay, I promise no more jokes, but couldn't resist that one. Also, a part of the HOA fee goes to the HOA reserve fund. Think of the reserves as like a rainy day fund, so if there's a capital improvement or some sort of upgrade that the community is looking to do, they have the money for that improvement, and it's going to come from the reserve fund. Be aware that if that reserve fund isn't hefty enough and a major capital improvement needs to or has to be made based on the bylaws and consenting votes needed, a special assessment can be made. This is really common in condo complexes where, for instance, the roofs need replacing and the funds that were earmarked for the project are no longer sufficient due to increased material and labor costs. Note that your realtor should also be able to get a current financial statement from the HOA so that you don't get blindsided by lack of funds. Most HOAs will also hire a management company to handle all the financials, contracts with vendors, policing of the policies, etc. HOA fees can increase. Most bylaws will set a percentage that they can increase each year. They can stay the same, but rarely, if ever, do they decrease. Another pro of the HOA fees, and granted you might be thinking, well, I don't see how this benefits me, so how is this going to be a pro? If you think about it, the pro of paying these HOA fees is that you're getting a lot of the neighborhood's maintenance done for a low cost, as the entire community's costs are being shared amongst all the homeowners. You don't have to personally go out and say hire a landscaper, a snow removal company, or worry about the lights at the entrance. Most of what the HOA takes care of, you just take for granted. One thing to note here is that choosing a property will often come down to, do I want an older house with more maintenance items where I could do whatever I want to the exterior? Or do I want a newer home in an HOA with lower maintenance costs, but I'm subject to some rules here and there? The next con that we're going to look at is rental restrictions. Especially considering the current influx of large institutional buyers who buy single-family homes for the sole purpose of renting them, an HOA will probably have some sort of restriction on the number of rentals that are allowed in the neighborhood. If you're thinking you're going to buy a house in an HOA and then rent that home out, be sure to contact the HOA for the current status of rentals. Why would the HOA care? Because, unfortunately, a lot of rented homes are not well maintained, and it has become impossible to deal with the institutional owners. Sometimes you can't even find out who they are or get a hold of them. It seems like they honestly don't care about bringing down everyone else's property values. A lot of HOAs also have short-term rental restrictions. Be aware that if you're buying a starter home, plan to keep it and rent it out when you upsize, that may not be an option. Make sure you know what's in the CCRs, those conditions, covenants, and restrictions, and make sure to read all the amendments to the bylaws. Our next con is sadly that the HOA could be poorly managed. Now, the HOA's job is to manage the property, but not all HOAs are created equal. And what I mean by this is sometimes the HOA is only as good as the people that manage it. The board of the HOA is made up of homeowners in the community, and if these homeowners have ulterior motives, and I'm not saying anyone does, but I could name a couple of instances where that was the case. But anyway, say they did, or maybe they don't pay enough attention to finances, and there could end up being deferred maintenance that affects the values in the community. If the HOA is struggling financially, that may also affect new purchasers that are trying to get a loan on a property in that community, or it may mean that there's a special assessment around the corner to pay for all that deferred maintenance. Unfortunately, there's no real perfect science to understand if an HOA is poorly managed, especially if you haven't bought into the community and you're trying to figure this out. My best advice is to walk through the neighborhood. See if the sidewalks are cracked. See if homes are poorly kept. Check to see if the entrance is inviting and nicely landscaped. If the neighborhood has a pool and tennis courts, look to see if they have been maintained, and always, always look through those CCRs, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions to see if there's anything in them that you can't or would refuse to adhere to. Ask for the financial statement to see if the association is solvent. At the end of the day, the HOA's job and their goal is to help maintain and even increase the value of the properties in that subdivision. As I've noted, those goals come with a cost, and I'm not just referring to the dollar cost. After you've purchased, if you don't like the way the HOA is doing their job, volunteer to be on the board, and if not on the board, attend the annual meetings where you can present your views. Be nice to the board members. Did you catch that? They are volunteers. Anyway, some people love HOAs, some people, and I can see some of you already reaching for that thumb down button. Some people not so much. But seriously, If you did learn anything, hopefully you'll hit the thumbs up button. My goal here is to educate you on your home buying purchase. I hope this video was helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, see you on the other side of sold.